The dictator Maduro is a Cuban puppet, protected by Cuban bodyguards, hiding from his own people, while Cuba plunders Venezuela's oil wealth to sustain its own corrupt communist rule.
My voice will never shut up, and my voice will be loud always, with or without Trump. Trump is rude. He is telling me he's going to deal with us and end us. But even with Trump, Venezuela will keep moving forward and will fight for this destiny.
As the political unrest and instability in Venezuela reaches a boiling point, two of the most notorious and powerful gangs in all of the nation have turned against President Nicolas Maduro. They have sent a stern message about how they will retaliate if change does not happen soon. Meanwhile, with the United States presidential election just a short time away, many are terrified of how the outcome may affect the future of Venezuela. This is only the beginning of what is sure to be many shocking new developments in Venezuela and beyond. The origins of El Tren de Aragua. El Tren de Aragua is one of Latin America's most violent and disruptive criminal organizations. Originating in Venezuela, this gang has expanded its reach across the continent, employing extreme violence to assert control over territories. The gang's activities include extortion, murder, kidnapping, human trafficking, and the smuggling of arms and drugs. El Tren de Aragua is notorious for its brutal methods, using violence to dominate local gangs and seize control of the drug trade, particularly exploiting the routes used by Venezuelan migrants to enter other countries. El Tren de Aragua's origins can be traced back to Venezuela, with its operations centered in the Tocaron prison in the state of Aragua. Hector Rusin, for Guerrero Flores, known as El Niño Guerrero, emerged as the leader of the gang in 2012, gaining control of the prison through violence. The prison became a stronghold for the gang, complete with luxurious amenities like restaurants, swimming pools, and even a zoo, all of which were controlled by the gang. Over the years, the gang expanded its criminal operations beyond Venezuela, establishing a transnational network that now spans multiple countries in Latin America and has reached the United States. Expansion of El Tren de Aragua into the United States and Latin America. The expansion of El Tren de Aragua into other Latin American countries has been marked by violence and terror. In Colombia, for example, the gang has taken control of illicit economies such as micro-trafficking and prostitution, often clashing with other criminal groups like the National Liberation Army, ELN, to dominate these markets. In Peru, Chile, and Ecuador, the gang has also established a presence, using similar tactics of violence and extortion to impose its will. In recent years, El Tren de Aragua has expanded into the United States. Authorities in cities like El Paso, Texas, and New York have detected the presence of suspected gang members. These members often cross the border illegally, blending in with migrant groups before spreading out to major U.S. cities like Los Angeles, Houston, and New York. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies are closely monitoring their activities, as there is concern that the gang could establish a more organized presence in the U.S. Criminal activities and law enforcement response. Throughout the years, the gang's criminal activities have continued to become more and more heinous. They include everything from human trafficking and sexual exploitation to drug smuggling. Some people have had no choice but to flee their homeland of Venezuela after being threatened by the gang, many of them heading to the United States. But even the United States is not entirely safe from El Tren de Aragua. The gang's presence in the U.S. has also led to violent confrontations with law enforcement. In New York, for example, 7 individuals were arrested after a violent altercation with law enforcement officers in Times Square. Although not all charges were directly related to the gang, the incident highlighted the growing threat posed by El Tren de Aragua's members in the United States. The Tocaron prison and the downfall of El Niño Guerrero. The Tocaron prison, where El Tren de Aragua originated, was eventually raided by Venezuelan authorities in September 2023. The raid uncovered a massive arsenal of weapons, including grenades, explosives, and even a rocket launcher. The authorities also found drugs, Bitcoin mining equipment, and evidence of extensive criminal operations being run from within the prison. Despite the raid, the influence of El Niño Guerrero and El Tren de Aragua remained strong both inside and outside Venezuela. Rival cartels, Le Tren de Aragua versus Tren del Llano. Like many other gangs, Le Tren de Aragua has one very strong rival, which is Tren del Llano. The Tren del Llano is another criminal organization based in Venezuela. It is primarily known for its criminal operations in the Llanos region, which includes the states of Apure and Guárico. Like the Tren de Aragua, the Tren del Llano began as a prison gang and later expanded its criminal activities. Its operations include drug trafficking, extortion, and violent crime. The group is known for its influence and control in the rural and semi-rural areas of the Llanos region. This organization is known for its hierarchical style of leadership structure, which allows it to maintain control over its criminal enterprises and territories. It often uses violence and intimidation to maintain its dominance and suppress its rivals. The rise of the Tren del Llano, similar to other criminal groups in Venezuela, is largely due to the country's economic collapse, corruption, and weakening of law enforcement. The lack of effective governance and security has created an environment where criminal organizations can thrive and expand their influence. The Tren del Llano has been implicated in various violent incidents and conflicts within the Llanos region, contributing to the broader issue of violence and instability in Venezuela. Its activities have expanded even further, now causing more issues throughout the United States as well. End of truce between Nicolas Maduro and the cartels. While the Tren del Llano and Tren de Aragua are vicious opponents in pretty much every other way, they seem to be sharing some of the same ground recently due to the fact that they both have claimed that they are unwilling to keep up their end of a truce with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Both of these gangs, which are known as the most powerful gangs in the entire country of Venezuela, have issued stern warnings to the government. They claim that they are very unhappy with the recent actions of the Chavista forces. They have also threatened to retaliate if their demands are not met. This act of defiance marks a new chapter in the relationship between the government and organized crime in Venezuela, putting the country's already fragile stability at risk. At the same time, Maduro declared war on Tren de Aragua. Authorities are on high alert as they try to control the situation, aware of the potential for violence that could break out at any moment. All of this could not come at a more complicated and historically crucial time, as Venezuela just recently wrapped up what has become known as a very controversial presidential election. While Nicolas Maduro claimed to have come out victorious, many of his own people, as well as political figures across the country, have been putting pressure on him to step down.
Turning now to new reporting about how the U.S. is approaching Venezuela's disputed presidential election. The Wall Street Journal reports, quote, the U.S. has discussed pardons for Maduro and top lieutenants of his who face Justice Department indictments, said three people familiar with the Biden administration deliberation. The Washington Post reports, quote, rather than taking the lead in pushing for Maduro to step down and threatening sanctions and other reprisals if he refuses, as the White House has done in the past, the current administration has placed its hopes in the triad of leftist Latin American governments to persuade him to yield.
The U.S. has many different reasons for its opposition to Nicolas Maduro's regime in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro's government has been accused of very serious human rights abuses. Reports include the suppression of political dissent, arbitrary detentions, torture, and extrajudicial killings. The Venezuelan government has been criticized for its crackdown on opposition figures and activists. The U.S. argues that Nicolas Maduro's government has undermined democratic institutions in Venezuela. This includes the alleged manipulation of elections, erosion of democratic norms, and consolidation of power by weakening or eliminating political opposition and independent institutions. But the U.S. reasons for wanting to take this president down hardly end there. The economic crisis in Venezuela, marked by hyperinflation, severe shortages of basic goods, and economic collapse, has been blamed on Maduro's policies. The U.S. views this economic crisis as a result of poor governance and corruption within his administration. But likely, the most serious issues that have been attributed to Maduro are the ones linked to drug trafficking, an issue that the United States has been fighting fiercely for years now. The US has alleged that the Venezuelan government is linked to drug cartels and that it serves as a transit country for narcotics, with drugs like cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl wreaking havoc and destroying lives across the United States on a nearly out-of-control level. This issue has been considered a top priority by the US government, but despite all of the controversy and opposition, it appears that Maduro is not going down without a fight.
So far, efforts of the presidents of Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil, all of whom have relatively stable relations with Maduro, appear to have achieved little. It comes as Maduro called opposition leader Maria Corina Machado a terrorist and a fugitive of justice.
Maria Corina Machado is a lawyer and politician who has been active in Venezuelan politics for several decades. She founded the political party Vente Venezuela, which advocates for free market policies and democratic governance. Maria has also been involved in various civil society initiatives and has been a vocal advocate for human rights and democratic reforms. Maria has been one of the leading voices in the opposition against Maduro. She has criticized his policies, accusing him of undermining democracy, committing human rights abuses, and mismanaging the Venezuelan economy. Her stance has made her a target of the Maduro government, which has accused her of conspiring against the state. Due to her outspoken opposition to the government, Maria has faced legal challenges and threats from Maduro's administration. She has been banned from holding public office and has faced accusations of involvement in alleged plots against the government. Despite these challenges, she remains a very important figure in the Venezuelan opposition. Maria has garnered international support from several different governments and organizations that view her as a key figure in the fight for democratic change in Venezuela. Her efforts to put both domestic and international pressure on the Maduro regime have made her a fierce and popular symbol of resistance. The United States considers negotiations with Maduro.
What more did you learn about the U.S. strategy and what they're trying to accomplish vis-a-vis Venezuela?
What we understand is that there's not yet an offer proposed to Maduro. However, there are many things on the table that the U.S. is considering to offer him as incentives to negotiate before a presidential inauguration in January in Venezuela. And among those options are the potential lifting of indictments against him and some of his allies in his inner circle.
In recent years, the United States has been trying to prosecute Maduro for a wide variety of different crimes, largely due to his human rights abuses, connections to drug trafficking, and corruption. In March 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a reward of up to $15 million for information leading to the arrest or conviction of Maduro. This was part of an indictment that charged him and other senior Venezuelan officials with drug trafficking and other criminal activities. The indictment alleged that Maduro's regime was involved in conspiring to transport cocaine into the United States and other countries. The U.S. has also been continuing to isolate Maduro's government diplomatically and economically. They've done this by supporting opposition figures like Juan Guaido and backing international efforts to try to hold Maduro and his entire regime accountable. This has included supporting resolutions at the United Nations and other international forums condemning the Venezuelan government's actions. So now, the fact that the United States could possibly be working on a potential deal that would pardon Maduro for his past alleged crimes shows how badly the U.S. government wants to get him out of office.
The U.S. also wants to allow Latin American countries to take the lead on these negotiations because there is an ongoing effort between Mexico, Brazil, and especially Colombia to get Maduro to the table. And so they also have their proposals and their offers that they're considering. But this week could be a crucial crossroads for this, and there is a hope that there could be a meeting between those Latin American presidents this week.
These Latin American presidents, who are hoping to strike up a deal with Maduro, were once on quite friendly terms with him in the past. That is, before he became the heavily controversial figure that he is today.
Meanwhile, there is more fear, more repression in Venezuela. What's the latest on the ground there?
Maduro himself and his government boasts of more than 2,000 detentions. We know of at least 23 deaths, and many of those in protests. And there's just a great deal of fear right now. People have had their passports annulled. There is, a crackdown on the use of WhatsApp. And, Maduro has said he was banning X as well. And there's just a great deal of fear.
What the upcoming U.S. election could mean for Maduro. In the meantime, with the United States 2024 presidential election just months away, many are anxiously awaiting to hear about how each of the presidential candidates plan to handle issues in Venezuela if they ultimately end up winning the presidency. The U.S. has issued a decisive warning that could radically alter the political landscape in Venezuela. Both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are seeking to demonstrate a strong foreign policy stance, using the Venezuelan situation as a key stage to show leadership and determination. Donald Trump versus Maduro. Former President Donald Trump has not held back from his fierce criticism of Maduro in the past and has claimed that he's not afraid to stand up to him if given the opportunity. While he was president, Trump condemned Maduro's treatment of his own citizens and the harsh conditions that many Venezuelan citizens are forced to endure.
We are also committed to supporting those people in the Western Hemisphere who live under brutal oppression, such as those in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. According to a recent report from the UN Human Rights Council, women in Venezuela stand in line for 10 hours a day waiting for food. Over 15,000 people have been detained as political prisoners. Modern-day death squads are carrying out thousands of extrajudicial killings.
Trump did hold back when name-calling the Venezuelan president, even calling him a puppet.
The dictator Maduro is a Cuban puppet, protected by Cuban bodyguards, hiding from his own people, while Cuba plunders Venezuela's oil wealth to sustain its own corrupt communist rule. Since I last spoke in this hall, the United States and our partners have built a historic coalition of 55 countries that recognize the legitimate government of Venezuela. To the Venezuelans trapped in this nightmare, please know that all of America is united behind you.
During his presidency, Trump consistently voiced support for Venezuelan opposition leaders, particularly Juan Guaido, whom he recognized as the interim president of Venezuela. He pledged U.S. support for efforts to challenge Maduro's authority and promote democratic change in Venezuela. In 2019, Trump made headlines by suggesting that a military intervention in Venezuela was a possibility. He did not elaborate on specific plans, but stated that all options are on the table. This statement was met with some pretty major controversy and concern from both domestically and internationally. While he was in office, Trump's administration significantly increased sanctions against Venezuela and Maduro. He was vocal about maintaining and expanding these sanctions to isolate Maduro economically and politically, aiming to pressure his regime into negotiating with the opposition. While Trump is certainly no fan of Maduro and the way he is running the Venezuelan government, Maduro has sent plenty of criticism back his way throughout the years. In a rare interview, a U.S. correspondent read statements Trump had made about Maduro and then asked Maduro to respond.
President Trump has upped his criticism of you and your administration since the creation of the Constituent Assembly. And I want to read you a quote from President Trump that he made, a statement that he made at the General Assembly. He said, "The Venezuelan people are starving and their country is collapsing. Their democratic institutions are being destroyed. This situation is completely unacceptable and we cannot stand by and watch." As far as I know, Mr. President, you haven't spoken with President Trump. If you do, what will you say to him, and what would you say now to the American people?
With the help of a translator, Maduro clapped back, saying that he and the people of Venezuela have only ever wanted respect.
Pueblo norteamericano, nosotros siempre le decimos la verdad.
I would say to the US people the truth, and we've always done so. Venezuela wants only one thing: respect. The time of US interference in the social and political life of Latin America and the Caribbean should be left behind. Venezuela is the object of desire of ruling circles in Washington for two reasons. Our riches, the riches of our country. We have the largest proven reserves of oil in the world. We have growing reserves of natural gas. We are number 8 in terms of gas reserves in the world, and these reserves are growing because on top of oil, we are also exploring some gas deposits. Now, Venezuela raised the flag of a new model of waking up the peoples on our continent, but they want to suppress this idea, this example.
He then took things a step further, claiming that Trump doesn't actually know what it is that he's talking about when it comes to Venezuela, and that he had no right to comment on their choice of military action.
It's not just about Trump, because Trump is reading his notes. He doesn't even know where Venezuela is on the map. He doesn't even know where Puerto Rico is. He did not know that. He went to Puerto Rico and he came there during the tragedy and insulted them. These are our brothers. If you say to him, Simón Bolívar, he thinks that's a rocker, a singer. He doesn't know who that is. He repeats what the Pentagon writes for him.
Maduro made it clear that he has no intention of letting Trump interfere with his plans for Venezuela.
My voice will never shut up, and my voice will be loud always, with or without Trump. Trump is rude. He is telling me he's going to deal with us and end us. But even with Trump, Venezuela will keep moving forward and will fight for this destiny.
Kamala Harris's stance on Venezuelan issues. On the other end of the political aisle, Kamala Harris has also shared some of her own opinions about Maduro and the Venezuelan government, making her opposition to the current Venezuelan president very clear. She has emphasized the U.S. support for democratic movements and human rights in Venezuela. She has also condemned the Maduro regime's repression and human rights abuses. Harris has supported Juan Guaidó, the opposition leader who declared himself interim president of Venezuela in 2019. The U.S. has recognized Guaidó as the legitimate leader of Venezuela and has imposed sanctions on Maduro's government in support of Guaidó's efforts. The vice president has also highlighted the importance of providing humanitarian aid to Venezuelans affected by the crisis and has called for increased international support to address the humanitarian needs. Speculation about U.S. intervention in Venezuela. So how does the United States plan to move forward as far as potential military intervention in Venezuela? Well, for now, it is all still a lot of speculation and a pretty controversial issue. Some believe that a U.S. military intervention could benefit the South American nation, but it could also have far-reaching consequences for the region and the world. Some advisors working for the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington have claimed that, at this point, military intervention seems highly improbable. For now, U.S. citizens are not in immediate danger, and the circumstances don't currently justify military action against Venezuela's neighbors. Should the situation change, the U.S. might consider using force, but Venezuela's military capacity, especially its militias and revolutionary groups, is significant enough to make any military engagement a pretty major challenge. The U.S. is particularly cautious due to its previous negative experiences with insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan, making an invasion of Venezuela all the more unlikely. What does the future hold in terms of this controversial issue moving forward, and how exactly will the United States presidential election impact it? For now, only time will tell. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.